What disturbed King Charles so much that he cried after a private conversation with Princess Anne? Anne, known for her candor, told him something he didn't want to hear. Was it about royal traditions, the monarchy's future, or a life-changing decision? Did Anne warn him of a major error? Will Charles listen before it's too late? Find out. A private conversation began, one never meant to leave Buckingham Palace. Whispers spread soon after. A covert encounter between King Charles and Princess Anne was reported. The king was moved by what happened behind closed doors. Charles showed rare vulnerability, according to certain accounts. A man who has always controlled his emotions. Some say it was much more important. Confrontation that made him rethink his choices. The monarchy has relied on Princess Anne for decades. This royal never complains, seeks attention, or wavers in her duty. Anne was reared with a different sense of responsibility that required resilience, independence, and unwavering loyalty to the crown, unlike Charles, who was groomed for royalty from birth. She always supported her brother, providing advice when needed and telling him the hard truths that others avoid. Those familiar with the royal family know that Anne and Charles have a unique affinity. They were born 2 years apart and raised under Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, who imposed royal protocol, protracted separations from their parents, and heavy tradition-keeping. Charles inherits, was always pampered, whereas Anne was encouraged to be independent. Despite their radically varied roles, they understood each other like no one else. Anne has always been very protective of her brother, yet she has never compromised her honesty. She has never been afraid to question his decisions or remind him of his duties. She had something to say this time that Charles wasn't ready to hear. Reports said their private conversation focused on the monarchy's future. Charles has navigated a swiftly changing world where public view of the royal family is more fragile than ever as king. Today's decisions would influence the institution for decades, and Anne, who has dedicated her life to royal traditions, was reportedly concerned about the path. Anne and Charles had argued over duty and tradition before. The years of Princess Diana's marriage to Charles highlighted their disparities. Diana's charm and charisma captivated the globe, but Anne was dubious of her attention. It wasn't personal. Anne thought royal life was about service, not fame. She preferred quiet dedication to Diana's fame. Anne believed it sometimes overshadowed royal duties. Despite their conflicts, Anne never disrespected Diana. She recognized Diana's pressures, but didn't always agree with her solutions. Anne stood her ground when Charles and Diana's marriage ended in the early 1990s. She didn't make public statements or participate in the separation media circus. Instead, she prioritized monarchy dignity. She had expressed her opinions by 2005, when Charles remarried. She was never close to Camilla, and though she accepted her role in the family, she believed that titles and prestige should never trump duty. Anne believes royalty is about duty, not happiness, sacrificing and serving. She has made family decisions based on this idea throughout her life. Her children, Peter Phillips and Zara Tindall, lived more privately and independently without royal titles, unlike many royals. She made an uncommon decision to save her children from royal expectations, but it showed her deep awareness of what it means to serve the crown. The stories about Anne's encounter with Charles are intriguing because of her history of making difficult, sometimes contentious decisions for the monarchy. Anne didn't speak for personal gain or emotion. A strong feeling of duty drove it. What caused such an intensive discussion that Charles was clearly affected? Had Anne addressed him about his monarchy reforms? Had she contested a choice that contradicted her lifelong beliefs? Most importantly, what did this portend for the royal family's future? The communication between Anne and Charles remains secret, fueling suspicion. One thing is certain, Anne never speaks without purpose. This time, her words seem to have affected the king. Princess Anne and King Charles met privately, but its impact was unmistakable. Friends of the king observed a change in his temperament in the days that followed. He had always been a calm man who rarely allowed emotions interfere with responsibilities. One thing about this talk stuck with him. What had Anne said to cause such a reaction? For Anne's remarks to resonate, one must comprehend her unusual bond with her brother. Anne and Charles never fought, unlike many royal siblings. No one vied for the crown or recognition. Instead, their upbringing shaped their friendship, allowing them to rely on each other in ways few could understand. Their upbringing emphasized duty over emotion and responsibility over ambition. They understood each other despite their differences. Monarchy must always come first. However, comprehension did not necessarily entail agreement. Anne had always spoken up when she thought Charles was making actions that could harm the institution. However, this time was different. The stakes were higher, and Anne's confrontation had hit home. Reports regarding their interactions sparked speculation. Some insiders said Anne questioned the monarchy's modernization. Charles specifically sought a more efficient, modern royal family that mirrored a changing Britain. Anne never fought modernization, but she valued tradition. Their mother, Queen Elizabeth I had long believed that the monarchy's future depended on its ability to rise above personal interests and outside influence. Anne has taken such a firm royal attitude before. She advocated for royal family behavior, particularly in personal connections decades before. This was most clear in her view of Charles and Diana's marriage. The fairy tale vision of a young, beautiful princess becoming a princess when Charles married Diana in 1981 captivated the globe. Different family members had different ideas. Her honesty was always known. Though she never openly insulted Diana, she was never close to her. Anne was always quiet and no-nonsense. Unlike Diana, who charmed the public with her warmth and tenderness, she preferred action to emotion and favored discretion over public attention. Anne didn't dislike it personally. Simply put, she saw royal responsibility differently. She thought monarchists had to be dedicated, and she was cautious of Diana's public conflicts. Anne found the media's Diana obsession double-edged. It gave the royal family great popularity, but also drew scrutiny that may weaken the institution. As Charles and Diana's marriage crumbled, remained realistic. She did not participate in the emotional repercussions or take sides. Instead, she prioritized royal duty and monarchy preservation, as she always had. However, family strife was unmistakable behind the scenes. One of the most traumatic royal separations was Charles and Diana's 1992 split. The world saw the monarchy's internal troubles and wondered about the future. Anne kept her duties and avoided the public eye during the divorce. Although the press covered every element of the breakup, she continued her activities, resolute not to let personal concerns overwhelm royal duties. Perspective, not indifference, was her attitude. She always believed the royal family must be strong in difficult times. Unlike Charles, who was always more introspective and sensitive to public opinion, had learned to compartmentalize, not dwelling on personal disputes. She continued, assuring institution stability. That may have troubled Charles most in their latest meeting. Anne was never sentimental, but she felt. She spoke to him so forcefully today because she feared his decisions could have long-term effects. She had supported him in ways the public would never see, but she had never been reluctant to criticize him when she believed he was deviating from monarchy principles. Another long-standing issue needed to be considered. When Diana died in 1997, the royal family was scrutinized like never before. The world grew